All right, ready for this. We're going deep on Rosa Parks.
Deeper than just the bus ride.
Way deeper. We've got a whole stack of sources here.
Interviews, documentaries, the whole 9 yards.
Really going to try to uncover, the real person behind the icon.
It's amazing how she's kind of been reduced to that one act,
Yeah.
But she was an activist for a decade.
So understand her, we got to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, her childhood. I mean, imagine this. Her grandparents were former slaves.
Wow. So she was literally learning about the fight for equality firsthand?
From people who lived through it.
That's powerful.
And then there's the story about her grandfather.
Oh, yeah, with the KKK.
Defending their home with a gun.
Imagine the impact of that experience. I mean, it really shows you that courage and that determination.
And then in the family.
Yeah. What about her mother? What was her role?
Well, her mother was a teacher, and she instilled in Rosa this deep belief in the power of education.
Okay.
And she even sent her to a school run by white women.
Oh, wow.
Who, surprisingly, treated the black students with respect.
That's almost a contradiction, isn't it? Like, given the times.
It was. It was definitely unique, but it probably shaped, her commitment to equality. And then she meets Raymond.
Raymond Parks, her husband?
Yeah.
He was really her introduction to activism, right?
He was. He was really involved with the NAACP.
Yeah.
And they held, these late-night meetings about the Scottsboro Boys case with, guns on the table.
The Scottsboro Boys case. Remind me about that one.
So 9 young black men falsely accused of raping 2 white women.
Oh, right.
It was a huge case in the 30s. Really exposed the racism in the legal system.
And Rosa and Raymond were deeply involved in that.
Oh, yeah. They were really putting themselves out there.
And it wasn't just meetings. I mean, Rosa was investigating racially motivated crimes too, right?
You're thinking of Recy Taylor.
Yes, that case.
A young black woman brutally raped by 6 white men.
Awful.
Rosa worked tirelessly to try and bring her attackers to justice.
Wow, this is all before the bus. It's like a whole other side of her story.
It really shows you that the bus wasn't just some random act, It was years of activism and really understanding the injustices she was facing.
So let's talk about that bus boycott.
All right. Over a year that boycott lasted. Can you imagine?
That's incredible. All that organization, the commitment.
People were carpooling, walking groups, a whole network. It wasn't just local either.
I mean, and it was all sparked by Rosa refusing to give up her seat.
It was planned. She knew what she was doing. She'd attended workshops on nonviolent protest.
It's amazing one person's actions like that, changing the course of history. But there were consequences, right?
Of course. Rosa and Raymond, they both lost their jobs, death threats.
It's scary to think about.
They ended up relocating to Detroit for their own safety.
And that's a whole other chapter in her life.
A chapter we often forget about.
So let's go to Detroit, shall we?
Let's do it. So Detroit in the 60s, man, what a time.
Yeah, a hotbed of social and political change, right?
Segregation, poverty, police brutality. It was all happening.
And even though she'd left Montgomery, I mean, the fight clearly didn't stop for her.
It didn't. And it wasn't just continuing the fight. It was like her vision of what that fight meant was changing too.
How so?
Well, it was broader than just segregation in the South. She started connecting with activists working on, labor rights, economic justice, housing, all these different issues.
It sounds like her understanding of equality became more intersectional.
Yeah, exactly. She saw how all these different forms of oppression were all connected, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't enough to just address one thing. You had to get at the root of the problem, that whole system.
And how did she actually put that into action?
She joined Congressman John Conyers' staff.
Conyers?
Yeah, he represented Detroit in the House.
Oh, right. So going from grassroots activism to working within the system.
Exactly. And she wasn't afraid to tackle, tough issues like Vietnam.
Oh, Vietnam War. Yeah, that was a pretty divisive issue.
Oh, yeah, even within the civil rights movement.
Right.
But for her, it was about those resources. Money going to war when it could be spent on poverty, on inequality.
Again, not afraid to take a stand, even when it might have been unpopular.
Absolutely. And that stance on Vietnam, it shows you she was thinking bigger globally. It was all connected for her. Imperialism, militarism.
And you said earlier that her work in Detroit, it often gets overshadowed by the bus boycott, right?
Yeah.
What were some of the big things she was pushing for in this period?
Reparations. She was really passionate about reparations for Black Americans.
Oh, wow. That's a big one and still so relevant today.
Right. But she was talking about this decades ago. It wasn't just about money either.
It was about acknowledging the harm.
Exactly, like taking real steps to repair it.
It's amazing when you think about it. Local activism, working with the congressman, national policy, she was everywhere.
And we haven't even talked about the Black Power movement.
Right, yeah, I think a lot of people associate her with King's nonviolent resistance.
But she was connected to Black Power too.
That's a different approach.
It is. I mean, she never rejected nonviolence outright, But she did believe, black people had the right to defend themselves.
Right.
She saw it as a response to, like, the racism and the police brutality that was still going on.
So it's more about, like, broadening her understanding of the fight, not necessarily abandoning her old beliefs.
Exactly. It's like different tools for different situations, right?
Yeah.
Nonviolence, black power. It wasn't one or the other. They both had their place.
They're like social movements. They're not one big, homogenous thing.
Right. There's always different opinions, different approaches, and they change over time.
And Rosa Parks was a part of all that.
She was, and she shows us that, these historical figures, they're not statues. They were real people.
With their own complex beliefs.
Exactly, and we have to remember that.
It's kind of amazing how much we've learned about Rosa Parks, beyond just the bus.
It really changes how you see her, right?
Totally. Like, not just the tired seamstress narrative.
Oh, yeah. He was smart, strategic, and she was in it for the long haul. And her activism, it totally evolved as the fight for equality changed,
It reminds you that these historical figures, even the ones we consider icons, they're complex people.
They had their own lives, their own contradictions.
Exactly. Okay, before we finish up, was there anything in the research that really surprised you about Rosa Parks?
You know what stood out? Her work on women's rights.
Oh, interesting. Within the civil rights movement.
Within and beyond, actually. She was very vocal about the challenges women faced, even within the movement.
Oh, wow.
Like, she talked about how their voices were marginalized, their contributions overlooked.
It's kind of sad, right? Even in movements fighting for equality, there's still these power dynamics.
It's true. And Rosa wasn't afraid to call it out. She challenged the male leadership, pushed for women to be recognized. She fought for equal pay, reproductive rights, things like that.
So for her, it was all connected. Racial justice, gender justice, it was all part of the same fight.
Absolutely. You can't have one without the other.
It's a good reminder that the fight for justice never really ends, does it?
It doesn't. We always have to be, like, checking ourselves, our own biases, making sure everyone's voice is heard.
And Rosa's story, it kind of gives us a roadmap, doesn't it?
It does. Courage, resilience, unwavering in her pursuit of justice. And she never stopped learning.
I'm feeling pretty inspired after this deep dive. She really shows you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things.
They can. And it makes you want to do something, right? Make a difference. We might not all lead national movements.
True.
But we can all contribute, whether it's speaking out, supporting organizations.
Even just having these conversations.
Exactly. It all adds up.
Okay, one last thought before we go. Something that really got me thinking, even though it wasn't specifically in our sources.
Uh-oh, what's that?
What if Rosa Parks hadn't been arrested on that bus? What if she had just moved?
Wow. Yeah, it makes you think, huh?
Like, we see these big moments in history and we kind of assume they had to happen.
Right, like it was inevitable.
But it wasn't, was it? One small choice could have changed everything.
Exactly. Would the boycott have happened? Would something else have sparked it?
We'll never know.
But it makes you appreciate her courage even more, right, to make that choice, to stand her ground.
Yeah. It also makes you think about our own choices, Every day we have chances to stand up for what's right, to make a difference.
And even if we don't see the results right away, they matter.
So to our listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into Rosa Parks' life, we'll leave you with this. What choices will you make today? How will you use your voice, your actions, to build a more just world?
Let Rosa's story be your inspiration. Remember, even small acts of courage and kindness, they can have a ripple effect. Never stop learning, questioning, pushing for something better.
Until next time, keep diving deep.